Introducing Wonderlight, a groundbreaking new Catholic video game from Loyola Press. Wonderlight gives kids a new way to engage with and talk about their faith, putting their lessons of discipleship into practice in a safe and fun way. Kids role-play discipleship in an epic adventure with a customized character that lets children imagine themselves in the world of the game. Learn more at wonderlightgame.com.
OSV is more than what most people think it is. We serve somewhere between 8 and 10 million people with everything from pamphlets to periodicals to books to fundraising, now church management software, religious education, and the list goes on. We're always looking for new ways to serve the church so that individuals, families, and parishes can draw closer to Christ.
Welcome to this NCA 2021 live session entitled COVID-19 Recovery, a unique opportunity for school improvement. Our presenter is Sue Gerenstein from Catapult Learning. We invite you to actively engage with this presentation using the messaging and questions functions in the event platform. At the conclusion of the session, you will have the opportunity to complete a post-session evaluation and provide feedback that will also track your participation in our sessions. If you run into any problems, we invite you to refresh your page or use the help section on the event platform. Sue, thank you for being with us here at NCA 2021, and we turn it over to you to begin.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. There we go. So welcome everybody. I can't thank you enough for this opportunity to contribute to this year's NCEA conference that we are holding virtually, and to be able to speak to you within the continuous improvement area. As Scott said, my name is Sue Gerenstein. I am the Vice President for Professional Development here at Catapult Learning. And as in that role, I lead our Center for PD Excellence. And I've been at this for a very long time, been working in the professional development space for more than half of my over 30-year career as an educator. And so take great pride in the work that we do here at Catapult Learning in school transformation and professional learning. So who are we? We engage in education solutions that generate academic achievement and better life outcomes for all students. We offer a vast portfolio of services. And if you'll see on the upper left-hand side there that we are engaged in literacy and math intervention, the delivery of special education, autism programming and ABA therapy, and of course, in my world, professional development. We also offer a range of summer programs. And you can see that our scope and our span is significant, with more than 45 years of experience in the industry. On an annual basis, we serve almost 8,000 teachers, leaders, and coaches through professional development, serving over 25,000 educators. I should say we employ over 7,800 teachers, leaders, and coaches, and serve over 25,000 educators. We are working in 42 states with over 1,000 district partners, and you can see that we're operating special ed and alternative ed schools and ABA centers for students with disabilities. You can see that our footprint is rather large. We're working, as I said, in 41 states and Puerto Rico, and deliver professional development solutions in 24 states. I'm sure that many of you that are with us today have worked with members of our Catapult Learning team. And we also deliver professional learning services around the globe through a 5-year relationship that we have had with the Department of Defense Education Activity out of Virginia, just like NCEA. So today for our essential question, I'm asking, how can we position our lessons learned during the COVID-19 pandemic as a real opportunity to reimagine and improve our schools? Here at Catapult Learning, we believe that we are actually at a pivotal, opportune moment to rethink the way we are meeting the needs of our students and their families. And that this restart really gives us an opportunity to think about the best possible ways to organize for everyone's success, your leader's success, your teacher's success, your own personal success, and of course, your students' success. So we're going to take a look at some key principles for school transformation. We're going to identify a set of priority areas for, as I like to call it, and apparently Comcast does as well, bouncing forward from the pandemic, not just bouncing back, but again, leveraging this moment to really identify areas of opportunity where we can even come back better and stronger in meeting students' needs. And then consider shaping an instructional program to accelerate learning while at the same time supporting those critical social and emotional needs of your students. So as I said, Catapult Learning has been around for a very long time, and for probably more than 30 years, we have been operating what we call our Alliance Professional Development Solution. And I'm going to speak to you just briefly about Alliance School Transformation Models. And why did we label it this way? We refer to ourselves as an alliance partner because an alliance is a relationship in which people agree to work together. This is not something we do to you. This is something we do with you. And that's really critical. We've also designed, built out a research-based 5-strand design that we think takes a holistic approach at school transformation. And at its heart is a relentless focus on student achievement and the effective use of data to inform instruction and decision-making. We base that on some research that I'll share with you in a moment. But first, within the 5 strands, we pose an essential question in each of those strands. The 5 strands are leadership, learning environment, student and family support, pedagogy and curriculum, and assessment for learning. So these are shorthanded a bit, right? And so within each of the strands, we think about these essential questions as ways to begin a series of inquiry around our proficiencies and our capabilities in each of these 5 areas. And as I mentioned, we really leverage the research of Tony Brick out of the University of Chicago and his colleagues, who in 2010 issued a summary of evidence that they had collected longitudinally in schools in the Chicago Public District, really looking at the levers for school improvement that yielded the most positive student outcomes. We also lean heavily on the work of Michael Fullen, who is one of my all-time favorite educational leaders, really guiding our work around the critical area of leadership within our school design. And then last but not least, the work of Sheerans, who did a meta-analysis of a number of research studies around organizing schools for effectiveness and really pulling out, distilling it down to those key areas. So this is how we arrived at the 5 strands of our design. And we firmly believe that, that within those 5 strands, we really cover the essential ingredients for successful schooling. And I would also add that when we are working with our Catholic partners like yourselves, we also have a component of our 5-strand design that really focuses on operational vitality for maintaining and sustaining Catholic schools with vitality. So I had actually intended to do a little bit of interaction here, and I know that our platform doesn't really afford us that, but I'm going to ask you to participate in the privacy of your own viewing space, right? So you can see here that throughout this pandemic, this is what schooling has felt like to me, personally, working with our partners, residing with educators, being friends and colleagues with educators all across this country. And this diagram here represents to me the way we've been feeling as school leaders and teachers over this past year. So I was going to take a quick visual poll where, how has the work of an educator felt to you personally over this past year, with 1 being piece of cake, we've got this, what's different, to 5 being this has been insanity. My suspicion is that most of you are in the 3 to 5 range, right? That this has been a challenging year for all of us, for leaders, teachers, and certainly for our families. And honestly, most importantly, for the students that we serve, right? I just think about the uncertainty, the disruption, sometimes the loss and the trauma. It has been challenging, but we are on our way back. And I know that we feel this here at Catapult Learning, and I'm very hopeful that you do as well. And as we move through the stages of returning to more normal ways of operating, we may have been in that firefighting stage from like March through May or June, or maybe even into August and September. And in August and September, when we knew we had to bring students back into our schools, and we knew we were still being shouldered with some of those COVID-19 challenges, we started to begin to make sense of this new paradigm, right? And maybe as we moved into December and January, we started to align and get much better at being nimble and moving into hybrid teaching and learning and bringing kids back into traditional settings. But we're to the place now where we've got to start integrating and aligning those key initiatives, right? So building back even better. And I think it's worth noting, right, and important for us to say that we can come back better from a pandemic that has really beset us with innumerable challenges. So as we start to rebound, to bounce forward from this pandemic, here are some of the pitfalls that I recommend you avoid. Another educational leader that I've been leaning on heavily lately is Linda Darling-Hammond. She's professor emeritus at Stanford. She's the president at the Learning Policy Institute. And they had released a paper a number of months back called Restarting and Reinventing Schools. And she, like I, feels like this is a critical moment in sort of, bringing a bit of a rebirth to the way that we think about schools. And just recently, just this past weekend, she had a piece in Forbes, just kind of hitting some of the highlights of their position on this idea of reinventing schools. And I think probably the most important point that jumped out for me was this idea that as we reimagine schools, we have to create schools that place relationships at the center. And through centering relationships, and I'm going to talk to you about 6 themes or sort of key principles that I would encourage you to explore as we work to build back better. And these are some of the things that we certainly want to avoid. These are things that Darling-Hammond raised. If we respond to potential learning loss from the disruption to learning through tracking or drill and skill, or continuing a reliance on machine-based instruction, we will have missed an opportunity to truly re-engage our students in authentic, rigorous, and deep learning activities. And so hopefully the themes that I present to you sort of show you the other side of that coin, the alternative to that. The other thing is that we know that students will come back having experienced some considerable trauma. And we've got to be mindful of the way we are organizing discipline within our schools and avoiding models that lead to exclusion. Because in this moment, the last thing we can afford to do is remove students from instructional opportunities, right? Because we've certainly had enough of that over this past year. And then another caution is, oftentimes, let's face it, right, when we organize our staffing, the new folks oftentimes get the toughest assignments. And in this moment, we know that we're going to need our more experienced, seasoned veterans to take on the most challenging circumstances, the most challenging needs when we try to build back better. So let's talk about 6 key areas that we believe can really propel your continuous improvement and those opportunities to reimagine your school as you move forward. We're going to talk a little bit about organizational capacity and evaluating that capacity for bouncing forward in this moment. We're going to talk about the critical area of equity and cultural proficiency. We're going to talk about meeting the social and emotional needs of our students in this moment. And then more on the teaching and learning side, we'll think about leveraging time, resources, and supports in new and unique ways. And we'll talk a little bit about curriculum and embedding those essential prerequisite skills that students may have missed out on over the past year. And then last but not least, we've learned an awful lot during this year, and we want to be able to hold on to some of those innovative ideas around technology integration and blended instructional design. So let's dive right in. First of all, knowing where you are in this moment is going to be an important step in determining where you want to go, right? So conducting some sort of a holistic needs assessment that helps you to identify the strengths of your school and the way that you're currently operating, and potential areas for opportunities for growth. And you can see that I've included our 5-strand design, our what we call our knot, right? Like, we believe that if you focus in these 5 areas in your analysis, you will have a really clear picture of where you are and where you can grow. It's important to conduct a thorough exploration with a focus on analyzing your readiness for reimagining and accelerating learning. And you'll do this through the collection and analysis of multiple pieces of evidence to answer those essential questions. And you remember, I posted those 5 questions in the beginning of our presentation, thinking about, areas of leadership and pedagogy and curriculum and assessment for learning, and your learning environment, and the ways that you're supporting all students. So we find that to be a helpful framework, and I think you might as well. At the end of the day, what's really critical is that by doing that deep dive of what is currently happening in your school and having those hard, fruitful conversations as a team, we think it's in that dialogue. I think we're really good at this. I think we can grow in this area. Let's come to convergence around our opinions, our attitudes, our beliefs, and identify the best way forward. The second theme is alignment of time, resources, and supports, right? And so you see, this may be a familiar paradigm to you, but multi-tiered systems of support, whether you call them RTI or MTSS, or positive behavior intervention and support, right? You might even have a different label, a label that is unique to your organization. But in this moment, really being able to identify the students who are maybe slightly at risk or most at risk is going to be critical. And then organizing supports and the time to deliver those supports will be critical in this moment. So if you're already doing some sort of tiered intervention, maybe taking a second look at that and making certain that you've got adequate resources to meet the needs of your students in this moment. That could be really important. And certainly making certain that whether it's core instruction, that universal level of intervention, or the targeted and intensive interventions, are you leveraging the high yield instructional strategies that have been formed by the work of Marzano and Hattie most recently? And then of course, employing accelerated learning models. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. When we're delivering those opportunities for intervention and recovery. Now, the accelerated model is something that is pretty well spelled out, right? Now, I can talk a little bit more about this, but the accelerated model presumes that rather than always looking backwards and remediating, we are actually pre-teaching, scaffolding essential content. So if you know that you are teaching a lesson on integers in math, but you know that your students lack sort of fluency in mathematical concepts that underpin that lesson on integers, you may pre-teach and practice some of those foundational skills before moving into your core instruction. Of course, there are always going to be times when you also have to go back and reteach, but the right balance between acceleration and remediation should really be about an 80-20, 70-30 split. So really leaning more heavily on accelerated pre-teaching opportunities for students. Before you can pre-teach and identify the students that require scaffolding, you have to know where students are. So this is an important way, a data-driven model. Let's take a look at some examples. If I were teaching self-efficacy, I would want to make sure that I built student confidence in a particular set of skills before moving them into core instruction. What happens in remedial models is that students actually feel they feel like it reduces their self-confidence. They feel less capable. They feel as if they're being sort of put backwards as opposed to being moved ahead. And it can really lead to a sense of futility. If we're thinking about basic skills, right, just giving kids strategic sort of a power boost just in time to prepare them to be successful in that next lesson. And if we do this in a remedial model, oftentimes kids are being taught those skills in isolation, right? And so sometimes filling the vast chasm of gaps that students have developed over the years can just be too big an undertaking to really do successfully. We can build prior knowledge. We can augment prior knowledge if we're using that accelerated model. Whereas if we only think about knowledge gaps after the fact, we've missed that opportunity. And in terms of bringing relevance to the core instruction, we can build that relevance in and prepare the student for that main lesson topic. And if we're thinking about relevance after the fact, the student hasn't yet bought into that new concept, idea, or skill, we've missed yet again another opportunity. In terms of making sure that our tiered interventions are connected to the core, which is what the research tells us is really critical in being successful through intervention, we can explicitly connect new learning and familiar learning to the core instruction ahead of time. Whereas when we do it afterwards, again, typically that instruction feels isolated from the core. And of course, in terms of pacing, sometimes kids in remedial models can feel like they're doing the same thing day after day, whereas in the accelerated model, we keep that instruction active, fast-paced, very much engaging, using some of those Marzano strategies for engagement. Moving on to our next theme, where I talked about embedding essential prerequisite skills. One of the things that I think teams will need to really dig in on is, what are the power standards? What are the priority standards that we know we need to give additional attention to as we try and backfill potential learning losses? And that can only really be driven from data-driven cultures. So really understanding how we are formatively and summatively assessing our students and informing our instructional design through that data. Certainly we want to be mindful of frameworks, whether you're using Bloom's, and you're reaching higher, or you're using Webb's and you're digging deeper, but really thinking about rigor and scaffolding, similar to the way I described using those accelerated models. And then obviously, when will it happen? So we already talked about time and organizing those tiered supports. Same thing here. When do you embed pre-taught or retaught skills? Do you do it during the core? Do you do it during small group and one-to-one intervention? So making those decisions and organizing those additional learning opportunities is going to be critical in your continuous improvement efforts. And just a quick visit to Bloom's. Obviously, a lot of the researchers that are thinking about coming back stronger, bouncing forward out of COVID, they're speaking about rigor and student engagement. And it goes back again to my pitfall on drill and kill, or just that sort of low level practice on skills. We've got to get kids deeper, because in order to jumpstart and accelerate the learning process as we move into more traditional ways of being able to reach kids, we've got to center the relationships and go deeper and really provide those hands-on sort of strategic and extended thinking opportunities using collaboration, cooperative learning, project-based learning, really engaging kids in deeper, more meaningful ways. Next, I want to talk about promoting equity and cultural competency. Not only have we suffered through a year of, honestly, pandemic isolation and fear and trauma, but our communities have also experienced significant levels of racial, gender issues related to equity, issues related to police violence, issues related to political strife and divisiveness. It has been a tough year for our children and their families, and for all of you as well. And we've all experienced and watched these things unfold, some hitting us very close to home, some maybe from a distance. But we know that over this past year, what we've learned is that our schools need to be organized around and grounded in principles of equity and fairness and cultural proficiency, understanding structural racism, making sure that we don't just think about equity, but we advance actively equity, that we confront our own personal biases and biases when we encounter it in the workplace and in the community. And so really being an agent of change, an agent of movement around issues related to racism, gender equity, and cultural competence. There is this sort of continuum of cultural awareness. And I only offer this just as a sort of a touch point around assessing ourselves as individuals who work with young people and their families, and getting a sense of where we are in our own cultural awareness, because honestly, there's always room to grow. So you notice that even the box all the way to the right, cultural proficiency, where you are implementing changes to improve services, based upon cultural needs. Notice the arrow continues forward. There's always room to grow. And so here at Catapult Learning, we are seeing an increasing demand, a real need, a call for work in this area. Help us be better at serving the needs of our community members. We are honored and humbled that we've been chosen in many cases to engage in this work, but we stand firmly behind the value of this work, and feel that it is needed more than any time in our history. Next, I want to talk very briefly about social and emotional learning. As I've said numerous times today, we know that children have really borne the brunt of a lot of the isolation and disruption to learning and disruption to those connections that they have within their school community. And we think that an integral part of any curriculum should be the modeling and teaching of social and emotional skills, and that we are thinking about the delivery of our instructional program and our relational program through a trauma-informed lens, trying to be mindful of what our kids have experienced over this past year. We think that many kids have experienced stress and anxiety, and helping students cope with those potential triggers within the school environment. And we also feel strongly that growth mindset is a wonderful paradigm to bring to life within your learning environment. We also know that it could become increasingly challenging. Maybe you've got some kids still learning in a hybrid model or in a remote model, and as more and more of your students return to your classrooms, being able to maintain those safe and positive school climates. And last and most importantly for all of you, also thinking about your social and emotional well-being and promoting self-care and wellness within your adult learning communities is really critical. We certainly offer the CASTLE model, which identifies 5 competencies in the area of social and emotional learning. And you can see here that those 5 competencies are self-awareness and self-management. Often those two are somewhat linked or paired together, helping our students become responsible decision makers, increasing their social awareness, and building those personal relationship skills, the interpersonal skills that we know are so critical both in the school and in the broader community. The important thing to be mindful of is that social emotional learning is supported sort of in increasingly broader circles. So it's not just what happens in your classroom, and it may not just simply be a curriculum that you adopt, but it is something that can happen in your classroom, throughout the school, within the family, and within the broader community. There are many different sort of layers and levels to the building of social and emotional competency. But I think what's most important is that this is really about helping students develop those skills related to emotional intelligence and positive attitudes and grit and persistence and self-management, and being able to really master those interpersonal skills. It's also important to note, maybe your school has adopted an SEL curriculum, but we should think about SEL, social emotional learning, more broadly. These lessons can be learned in any setting and at any point of the day, right? So really building it in to the DNA of your school in ways that certainly moves beyond a simple program that you may have adopted. And yes, they can be supported through programs, but they are modeled and practiced throughout the day. They can be embedded in procedures and policies. So just some things for you to be mindful of as you think about sort of increasing the ways that you're meeting and teaching those social emotional skills. And then last, and certainly not least, we should be sustaining the innovative instructional design that we've become so good at over the past year. So, leverage your new learning about planning and teaching in multi-access learning environments. Utilize learning management systems, even when your students are in front of you, like Google Classroom and Teams, as ways to help organize the learning experience for your students. So many executive functioning skills that are bolstered by using some sort of an online learning management system. And then employ best practices in blended learning strategies, things like the station rotation model. I would imagine that many of your schools have made investments in technology, hardware, software, maybe some personalized learning programs that you're finding beneficial at sort of reinforcing, teaching and reinforcing some of those foundational skills. And so the station rotation is one opportunity, and flipping is another. I would assume that if you're working in multi-access learning environments, or if you have students who have been in and out due to COVID quarantining and that kind of thing, that you've gotten pretty good at flipping instruction, right? Maybe asking students to engage in some of the learning in remote environments, and bringing in some of those more direct instruction, collaborative opportunities when students are in front of you. So back to our essential question or objectives. I hope I've covered this ground with you in an adequate way today. It's really just intended to get you thinking about how we right the ship coming off of very rocky seas over the past year, and how we take this moment to actually come back better and stronger and more well equipped to meet the needs of our students and families who have been through this experience right alongside. At this point, I will bring this to a close and would invite a discussion. Thank you. So it looks like you have an opportunity to pose questions. I would welcome that. Would love to spend a few more minutes talking about this work. I feel like I should be playing the Jeopardy theme song while we wait, because anybody can host Jeopardy these days. So excellent question came in. Love to hear your thoughts on how to address teachers' needs. Yeah, that is, if you think about heart and head, I think as leaders, we are going to have to attend to both. And as I said when I started off, a lot of my friends and colleagues are educators, educational leaders, and I've watched firsthand what they've gone through this past year, what their teachers have gone through. And so I think certainly professional learning opportunities, professional learning communities, building that sense of shared purpose, not only to build back better and bounce forward, but to heal together, to be able to hear and honor the personal challenges that many of our teachers have experienced. So it really is about supporting both the heart and mind. And I think professional learning communities, local teaming, whether it's grade level teams, department level teams, and building professional learning community within those structures so that people don't feel isolated as they work back in this moment. That would be some of my recommendation. And certainly, because it's the business that we're in, providing learning opportunities that support both that social emotional well-being of teachers as well as feeding them professionally. Yeah, are there learnings from COVID that I think educators should hold on to? You know, as I mentioned, to me, this is a big one because we've been doing work around blended learning for a long time here at Catapult Learning. And I think there's real value and benefit to that. And because schools have made such an investment in the professional learning of their teachers to support students in remote learning, to use learning management systems, to design, you know, using the SAMR model, you know, thinking about using technology. I think we will come out of this a better, stronger, more well-informed, more versatile teaching force. To me, that is a tremendous win coming out of this. You know, if you think about the ways that we've struggled to help teachers integrate technology for decades, getting them sort of over that hump, over that fear, over that resistance, we had no choice. So now we've got a lot of new tools in our toolkits, and I think we should continue to build on that. So additional questions. One of the greatest challenges has been developing meaningful asynchronous work, and students just disengaging and just skipping those. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I know exactly of what you speak. So how do you help students continue learning, like during teacher PD days? That's a great example, right? And async, I think the async work, if you think about async from the lens of flipping, you have to connect the asynchronous work to the synchronous work, and even thinking about accelerated flipping. So I need you to respond to these two prompts. We're going to use an inquiry model, answer this question, make a hypothesis, and then come into the lab the next day, right? So connecting the asynchronous work to the in-class work. I think the other pitfall that we have to avoid with asynchronous work, if you think about homework is asynchronous work, right? Is the homework meaningful? Does it connect to the core learning? Do we ever come back to it, or is it just sort of repetitive practice? So I think we can increase engagement in asynchronous work by connecting it to the synchronous work explicitly. And if we think about assessment, tying assessment explicitly to the asynchronous work product along with the synchronous work product, so that those components are knitted together. I think those would be good suggestions for that. Great. How do we get administrators to focus on building better along with going back to the same environment? Yeah, and we go to trainings and there's no buy-in from administration, and then what? So we're trying to do online hybrid the same way we do in class. Yeah, so that's an interesting question. And as teachers, as a professional learning community, I would certainly hope that your leader would be open to sort of a shared collective pushing of yourselves to come back stronger and better, right? And so, you know, an entrenched leader would be quite a point of frustration for a team of motivated teachers. And all I can say is just keep trying, because at the end of the day, it's about putting your students at the center. How do we best meet the needs of our students? So that would be my advice there. A question did come in: is the organization privately funded? We are a public entity, a for-profit entity, but we've been engaged with non-public schools for more than 45 years. And I would assume that many of you who are participating today may have crossed paths with us. We do a lot of Title I intervention services, Title III, certainly a lot of Title II professional development, all publicly funded through primarily state education agencies, local education agencies. Here's a question: is there software you recommend other than Zoom where students can privately and immediately message teachers to check in daily? I think, boy, that's a great question. And if you don't need video, I know that Slack has been a really great community team building tool. And certainly if you're using a tool like Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams, there is an ongoing chat and dialogue, running dialogue feature there. Beyond that, I am at a loss, and hopefully I would check out Slack, because I think you might find that it's something that might meet your needs. All right, Kevin is telling me there are no additional pending questions. I want to thank you all for joining today. I know you had a lot of great choices, and I appreciate you checking in on this session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you all for attending this live session at NCA 2021. Please make sure to complete the post-session evaluation and use this opportunity to check out other live and on-demand sessions, our learning lounges, our virtual exhibit hall, and so much more. We'll see you at the next session. Thanks a lot.